All right. As he said, I wrote this book, Louisville Jug Music, and it came out in 2014, but I actually discovered jug band music in 1991. I was going through some import CDs from Austria, and I came across one called Clifford Hayes and the Jug Bands of Louisville. And it was all black musicians. And I said to myself, I had always thought a jug band was like some kind of white hillbilly group, string band, or Emmett Otter on the Muppet Show, or the Darlings from Andy Griffith. So I was like, what is this? And so that's how I got interested in this. And one of the groups that I discovered was Whistler's Jug Band. And Whistler's the guy with the guitar here. They called him Whistler because he used to have a nose whistle when he played. And he had like 3 jug players in his group. And in 1931, ABC came here for the Derby, and they recorded some jug band music. And they took Whistler out to Shelbyville because they couldn't find any place rural enough in actual Louisville to fit their purposes. So I'm going to play you a little bit of that film so that we know what we're talking about.
Went downtown to have this fun for the separation. Tiny girl. Carried home late on the chef. Got so doggone hard, got scared of himself. Come on down to my phone and I live my time. Hold it in. Cool down. Cool down. Please take no time. Call down to my phone and I live my knocked on the door and sounded loud. Out of the window, I took a peek. Keep that fast asleep. Down along the bill bag, on the bill bag,
Let me move on for there. So that is actually, this is the Henry Miles Jug Band, and that's that same jug blower there, Rudolph Thompson. And there was 30 active jug bands in Louisville between 1890 and 1930. The genre started to die down in popularity once the Great Depression hit, and it never really picked up among African Americans because you had the civil rights generation come in, and the imagery surrounding jug bands wasn't something that they embraced, but jug band music became popular again during the 1960s folk revival. But jug band was really part of Louisville's fabric. You can see here, this is an LG&E picnic, and they have a jug player there. I think this is from maybe early 30s. Oh, let me see if okay. This is the, in Smoketown, the Presbyterian Community Center. They actually were having the jug band class. And jug bands were often used, they were hired by businesses for openings and especially saloons to draw people in. So, and this is even, a white jug band, the Louisville Master Bakers Band. So, this is a Louisville Restaurant Operators Association meeting in 1939. So, jug band music is a river music. There was, I heard Pam say that, the river was like a superhighway. I always tell people it was an information superhighway. this button is kind of easy to touch. So all the major jug bands were in river towns. There was this continuum of music and culture along the river. So whatever was happening in New Orleans was happening in Memphis, Nashville, and Louisville, and it was just going all following along the Ohio and the Mississippi. So the major Louisville jug bands are unique, and I'll talk a little more about that later, because in Louisville, the jug bands incorporated jazz instruments into what they were doing. So once I got interested in jug bands, I wanted to know where it come from. You know, and jug playing, it usually is in a string band setting, and the jug is a place to bass line. The jug itself is a resonating chamber. So really, it's kind of like beatboxing, where the jug player is loosening and tightening his lips, and it's 2-octave range, but it's usually always accompanied the banjo, because the banjo is an African instrument. You know, it's based on these African lutes. And in a lot of art and stuff, you see images of black banjo players. And so one of the things that happened in the New World, not just North America, but in the Caribbean and South America, is that, you know, the fiddle and the banjo meet, and they kind of form, like in America, what we call old-time music. And jug playing was born out of that genre, because slave musicians didn't always have access to real instruments. So they would turn household instruments like spoons and different, household items into instruments. So this is another picture of a black banjo player. So when I went back, and I went back to the African ethnic groups that came here as enslaved people, and I found it was a wide range. The people who came here who were enslaved, they spoke different languages, they had cultural differences, but all of them had some common characteristics. And so in kind of like in the 18th century, they had to combine all of these different influences into what became African American culture. And also there was influences from the mainstream culture. So one thing that I found that was common were that there were these horns that they would put in masks and things like that. And this is one of the horns. And, by the first generation of enslaved people, the first few, they would have been more oriented towards Africa. They were African born. But the closer we got to the Civil War, the less the African Americans had a direct relationship with Africa. So some of the rites and traditions would continue, but they lost their original meaning. So these horns gave us the kazoo. The horn probably was in a mask or something, And so then I looked at particular cultures, and I found in the Congo, there's this group called the Luba, and they had these hollow gourds that they sang into. And they called them the singing gourds. I think Chipanini is the African name. And they had these horns. And I believe that they influenced the kind of technique of jug playing. And then there was another group in Nigeria called the Igbo. And the Igbo actually had an instrument that was a water jug with a hole in it. And the Igbo were actually the preferred slaves of Virginia farmers. And, Kentucky being part, at one time of Virginia, there probably are a lot of descendants of them in this area. But they were towards, during different periods, different ethnic groups, produced more enslaved people. So, but I think something like 1 in 6 African Americans has an Igbo descendant. So to test my theory, I looked at other places where the Igbo had been enslaved, and I found jug blowing. And so this is in Cuba, and they had, in the early Sun music, they had this instrument that, I'm gonna mess up the Spanish, I think it's a botija, and what it is an earthen jug with an extra hole in it.
Lo instrumental del son se basó.
So I talked about, I believe that's kind of like the background of how it got here. So as I said, that there was this continuum of music along the river. So in the 1890s, these kids bands started showing up, and they were called spasm bands, and they played on homemade instruments. Jelly Roll Morton, the jazz composer, when he was interviewed by Alan Lomax, he said they were the worst bands he ever saw. And there were these kids bands that played in Storyville, so they were playing in the red light district. So you see this kid here has a cigar box bass, and this is another New Orleans group, and the guy with the box has made his own percussion instrument. So it came to Louisville, and when the spasm bands came here, immediately the bourbon industry saw a chance for promotion. And so that's why we consider Louisville the home of jug band music, and why it was such an integral part of our folk culture here for a while. And so this is a collection of jugs like that they have in Oldham County at their historical society. And so, if you were on a saloon, you could get a jug and give it to a kid and have this little band outside drawing people into your saloon. And so, and they even had deals with distilleries. So this is the Louisville Jug Band, led by Earl McDonald, and they're the ones my book is about. But they had a deal. Earl McDonald was such a hustler. He was in the second generation of jug bands. So he saw the original groups in the 1890s, and he was in high school when he started the Louisville Jug Band. And they were the first jug band to play at Churchill Downs during Derby celebration. He had these deals, and then later when he started to record, he would sign contracts with different record labels. So it'd be the same group of musicians, but he'd have different names. So it'd be the Louisville Jug Band, Earl McDonald's Louisville Jug Band, the Old Southern Jug Blowers. He just kept the money going. So what happened was that in the 1920s, there was a fad. A record company had a hit with a ukulele orchestra. And so everybody was looking for some novelty recording. So there was a blues singer from Louisville called Sarah Martin. She grew up in Smoketown, and she would record it for OK Records. And she's like, "You want a novelty? I'm from Louisville. I know about jug bands." And so in 1924, she went into the studio with 3 members of the Louisville Jug Band, and their music was released. They released 10 sides in 1925 as Sarah Martin's Jug Band, and it caused a sensation. The Memphis Jug Band is probably the most famous of the jug bands, and their founder, Will Shade, said that he got the idea to start a jug band after he heard the Louisville records. So I'm going to play one of their tunes. And you see Earl McDonald and his partner Clifford Hayes wrote this song.
Did you ever wake up find your daddy gone. Turn over on your side, sing this lonesome song. I woke up this morning between midnight and day. You ought to see me grab the pillow where my daddy used to lay.
So I told you Earl McDonald was a hustler. He was so smart. And these were like young black men that wanted to play the new music. So at this time, jazz, or what they call hot music, was coming, literally coming off the boat. We had musicians going to New Orleans. So Hayes and McDonald started this group, the Dixieland Jug Blowers, and they had some New Orleans musicians. Well, they recorded in Chicago with like Earl Hines, who played with Louis Armstrong, and they did a lot of sides with Johnny Dodds, too, who was a clarinet player. And so this is just 2 years after what we just heard. So, as I say, Louisville jug music died down in the 30s, and in the 50s it kind of went over to Europe. There was this skiffle music craze in England, and so like bands like the Beatles and stuff, they actually got started playing, American folk music. And there's a Louisville jug band song called Overseas Stomp that was really popular. It was about Charles Lindbergh and all that was popular in England. And then it came back to America in the 1960s, but was mostly white teenagers getting into this folk music. So there was in 2004, Rod Wentz and Mr. Fish of the Juggernaut Jug Band, they started the National Jug Band Jubilee. And so I've been on the board for like 13 years now, way longer than I ever thought I would. And we bring, musicians from jug band musicians from all over the world. So this is a group from Japan that we had called the Old Southern Jug Blowers after Earl McDonald's band, and they paid their own way to come here because we had put up a tombstone for Earl McDonald. He was in the unmarked grave. So this is my friend Don Flemings from the Carolina Chocolate Drops visiting, and sometimes I take people on tours at the Louisville Cemetery because Sylvester Weaver, the blues guitarist, is there. Earl McDonald's there, and we partnered with the Kentuckiana Blues Society to put up a monument for Sir Martin. So the Jubilee, we bring musicians from all over the world, and we also try and educate people and just preserve the legacy of jug band music. So. Thank you.